I feel very, very lucky to be here virtually beside him today. But what makes Andrea truly special is that he is the founder and executive director of Earth League International, a pioneer in the use of professional intelligence and whistleblowing applied to environmental crime. So it's made up of former FBI and CIA agents, crime analysts, cyber experts, undercover investigators, and media professionals. So Earth League International fights environmental wildlife crime by merging the worlds of conservation, intelligence, analysis, whistleblowing, and media production. He collaborates on capacity building and knowledge transfer with various law enforcement and international agencies, including US Homeland Security, US Fish and Wildlife Service, and UNODC. He's also among the founding members of Wildlife Justice Commission in the Netherlands, a fellow of the Explorers Club in New York, a member of the board of the Africa Conservancy Foundation in Kenya, and the creator and project manager of Wild Leaks, the world's first whistleblower initiative dedicated to environmental crime. Before we start, let me remind our participants today that we would love to hear from you. If you have any questions at any time, please post them in the chat. But I'm not worried at all, because today we've been hearing a lot from everyone, which is absolutely amazing. That's exactly the kind of atmosphere that we want to be creating and nurturing. So thank you, and please keep on, posting your comments and your thoughts in the chat as the session goes on. So hello, Andrea. Would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really, really happy to be here today. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you for joining us. So finally, to get to my first question, Andrea, as I've outlined, you've dedicated your life to fighting against environmental crime. So environmental crime, as you told me earlier this week, is the fourth largest criminal industry in the world after drugs, counterfeit, and human trafficking. So it's obviously incredibly important that we're aware of the dangers of this industry and we study it. So can you tell us more about it? What do we mean by environmental crime, and how do we deal with it?
Yes, according to Interpol, is the fourth largest criminal enterprise in the world. So it's a big, big crime, up to $260 billion per year. And this, of course, includes not just poaching and wildlife trafficking, it includes also illegal fishing, illegal logging, the dumping of hazardous materials, and so on. So no wonder that big criminal groups want to put their money on, wants to put their hands on it, because it's a lot of money with very low risk. So every time, wherever I go, I think it's time we recognize that environmental crime is now orchestrated, let's say, at the same level of complexity of as every other major criminal enterprise, and with serious, very serious socio-economical and security implications. Unfortunately, for most countries, combating environmental crime is not really a priority, is not that important for various reasons, and so it remains overlooked and poorly understood. But environmental crime enriches international criminal groups to a point that you cannot believe. I will try today to explain you at what point, how much money they make from trafficking in nature, basically. So how to fight back? And this is exactly the problem. If you look at other global threats like narco trafficking, like organized crime, like terrorism, for example, intelligence is at the very heart of the strategy to fight back. You cannot dream to fight terrorism without intelligence. In the fight against environmental crime, intelligence is almost absent, actually absent. Everyone, media, donors, NGOs, public opinion, government officials, they're all focused on the two ends of the problem, on the two ends of the supply chain. The ground zero, so poaching and anti-poaching activities are very important, but they just buy time, they don't address the problem. Or the other end of the supply chain, which is advocacy and awareness. Let's talk to the consumers, let's change their minds. And it takes forever. And so far we failed. Nobody is actually putting his nose in the middle and going after the real enablers, the real drivers, the kingpins. And this is a problem. This is why we have been failing in the fight against environmental crime until now.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So we're hopefully going to try and unpack this all throughout the rest of the session. But, can we just rewind a little bit? How did you get into the environmental crime industry, and could you explain the path which has led to where you are today?
Okay, so it was a very, long, rich, circular journey in the sense that I got back where I started, but it took a lot of years to do that. I was born with a huge love for nature, for animals, and a huge desire to protect them. Since I was a child, for many years, for example, I remember I really wanted to become a ranger in Canada in a national park, and working with wolves and bears. And this was already high school, so you can imagine the jokes, and it was not so easy. But so I got a master's degree in natural science at the University of Milano, and I started working for a foundation, Italian foundation, that I'm still on the board of that foundation after many years. But sometimes life takes you to new interesting direction, so to speak. And so to make a long story short, without never leaving conservation, I jumped into business. I did another master's degree in business. I launched one of the very first e-commerce companies in Italy back in the days. It was the beginning of shopping online. From that technology, I went into other technology more related to security, intelligence, homeland security, the fight against terrorism and organized crime. And I did that for many years. So I worked with a lot of agencies, a lot of government officials, until 8-9 years ago, when I was in Kenya for a job, for a security assignment. And it was right in the middle of the elephant crisis, poaching crisis. International traffickers and poaching syndicates were killing 40,000 elephants every year for the ivory trade. And I thought, it's time to go back to where I started. I was unhappy, and I said, okay, let's leave everything and let's create a new NGO. But what? Which NGO? I didn't want to copy anyone. So I thought, let's try to merge all my career, all my life experience, all my contacts and networks into a new NGO, and try to create, that was my, and still is my obsession, to create the first intelligence agency for Earth, because I think Earth deserves and needs an intelligence agency to fight for it. And so fast forward today, I have a small but incredible team made up, as you said, of former FBI, former CIA, incredible people who have been fighting El Chapo, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, you name it, cyber experts, undercover, and together we try to stop the most important traffickers of nature in the world.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. Thank you so much. So we've already mentioned it a bit before, but could we go back to the ways in which environmental crime and other types of crime are related? Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, this is a very important point. It's called convergence, and it's called convergence because there's a convergence of different crimes, basically, in the hands of different people, of the same people. Sorry, and this happens, of course, at the top level of the supply chain. Okay, it doesn't happen on the ground. Of course, on the ground, usually you find poor people, poachers, illegal fishermen, local communities. I call it the temptation factor, meaning the trafficker arrives, it offers you 4 or 5 salaries, yearly salaries to kill an animal. It offers you 10 times you make in a month to fish a fish. Of course you do it, and I will do the same, I think. So we go after traffickers, but at the top level, basically transnational criminal networks and wildlife traffickers shares convergence points. So they share the same routes, they bribe the same people, they use the same ways to smuggle stuff out of the country. And to explain you better this concept, I will share with you a story that happened to us a few months ago. We were in Latin America. I cannot tell you which country because it's an active investigation. And we were finally, after many months of work, we got to a dinner with the most important wildlife trafficker in that country. And of course, our undercover team, they were fully wired, so they were filming and recording everything, undercover. And we started with this guy, and we talk about illegal seafood. He offered us almost 2 tons of shark fins that were available if we want shark fins and illegal timber. And we start talking about that. Then a second person arrived, And he introduced himself as the representative of the most important organized crime group in that country. And the conversation shift to money laundering. So the wildlife trafficker was explaining to us, he thought we were traffickers ourselves. This is how we get so close to these people. We pretend to be bad guys ourselves. He was explaining us how he does money laundering for the organized group. And then a third person arrived, and this person is a custom official working at the international airport, and his job is to facilitate any kind of smuggling in and out of the country, including human smuggling. So they start talking about human smuggling. So the conversation moved from wildlife trafficking to money laundering to human smuggling. And this is what convergence is. This is what the top of environmental crime looks like. You can you imagine, I think you understand that if you miss this level, you're blind. You are a Boy Scout. You are chasing poachers or illegal fishermen, while the top drivers, the top kingpins, do whatever they want to do, and they're very comfortable actually. So this is why it's very important to understand the interrelation between environmental crime and other crimes. And probably one of the most important thing I can tell you today is that there are now around the world many issues that we still call environmental issues or conservation issues, when in reality they became criminal issues. They are criminal issues with conservation implication, of course, but they are criminal issues. And so we should approach them with a different mindset, a different skills, and different professionals.
Yeah, thank you so much for that story. That's really, really interesting. And I think knowing sort of what your organization does, like obviously you can't actually make the arrests, but the methods that you have to like reveal these people are really, really interesting and really crucial to your work. So we have a question that I think links on really well. As someone asked, how can your organization enforce the rules on the field? Do you liaise with the local police forces? In many countries, there is also the issue of government corruption, which obviously is the case in Sea of Shadows and a lot of other countries you work in, which ends up in your way. So what is your sort of take on that?
Yeah, we usually, when we work in a country, we never tell government agency that we are in a country. We are ghost, and we remain ghost for a long time until we feel safe, and for sure until we have certain kind of teams deployed in the country. So we start revealing ourselves only when the undercover teams leave the country. And while we're doing what we're doing, we actually spend a lot of time in understanding whom we can trust. So when we get to the sharing part, when we have to deal with law enforcement, okay, whom we can share, because you can share information with the wrong officer or with the wrong office, corrupt, and you throw away everything. But also you can share information with someone who is not corrupt, but is lazy, so is usually useless, or is an honest guy surrounded by crooks, also not good. So it takes a lot of time and a lot of networking to understand, okay, who we can trust. And usually we do that. But because these crimes are most of the time international, and we're going after international traffickers, very often we manage to interface and to share information with other law enforcement agencies from other countries, for example, United States. So we share a lot of information with at least 3, 4, maybe 5 law enforcement agencies in the United States, and they can act on these people, sometimes even in that country, but certainly when they transit to the United States, because many of these guys use the United States as a proxy or as an end market. And that's why it's important for us to always find what we call US nexus, so a link to the United States, so the US can act. Sometimes it takes time, but for example, I was, this is one of my, probably it made my year this year, a month ago in November, after you saw a bit of Sea of Shadows. So after 2 years of sharing information with the Mexican authorities, for the first time last month, Mexican authorities conducted some serious raids and arrested important seafood traffickers and totoaba traffickers in Mexico based on our information. So sometimes they do it. They need a lot of pressure. About 2 years ago in Thailand, the Thai authority arrested two of the most important traffickers in Asia, again, because of our work. But I can tell you also of cases that nothing happened, unfortunately, because they just didn't want to act. It happens as well, but we do our job anyway.
Okay, yeah, I'm just looking through the chat because there are a lot of questions. There's now a discussion about the lessons from the Silk Road in China of the past that might be useful in the 21st century, including the Belt and Road. Do you have any thoughts about that? Do you know?
Yeah, well, this is a gigantic project of the Chinese government, basically, not to recreate the ancient Silk Road. So basically, they want to connect a lot of countries around the world from a commercial point of view, from a logistic point of view. So it goes, of course, it ends in China, but it goes through Africa and Europe and Latin America. And this, of course, is also a problem for for nature in general, because yes, it means more commerce, more business, probably more positive things, but it also means that it gets even easier for international traffickers to do what they do, and it gets easier to reach wild places. For example, the Chinese government is building roads everywhere around the world, in Latin America, in Africa, and traffickers and if you want to exploit nature, the first thing you need is a road. Otherwise, it's too complicated to get there. So it's our positive development, I'm sure, for certain countries, but it's also a problem.
Right. Okay. Just moving back a little bit to the question of methods. I know obviously you mentioned that the Earth League International was the first people to do this kind of work, but now, now Interpol also has environmental crime unit, as do the UN and Homeland in the US. So how is the work you do different? Is it complementary? Is it or is it different in a way?
It's complementary because none of them do intelligence gathering and undercover operation. None of them. Why? Because it's dangerous, it's complicated, and you piss off a lot of countries and a lot of people, of course. So if you are an entity like Interpol or UNODC, you have always to remain, your role is very diplomatic, of coordination. It's a very important role, of course, but you cannot start spying in another country. Of course, it's impossible. If you are an NGO, for example, big NGOs, they deal with environmental crime, but not from an investigative and intelligence gathering point of view. They do capacity building and training, and they provide equipment, and they do conference, all very important things, but they cannot do intelligence gathering and undercover operation. Otherwise, they will be kicked out from every country they have an office and stuff. So yes, our role is complementary, meaning we are, sometimes I define ourselves like fact finders. We go in, we put our nose in the dirt, and we come back with facts, not with rumors, not with I hear that, with facts backed by video, photo, documents, and so on. So, and then someone else can do something about it with our facts. So in other words, we are sort of law enforcement and justice accelerators, because with our work, they can do things faster if you are a law enforcement agency, for example.
Yeah, I think this is really the methods you use are really crucial, and thinking about the wider issue of sustainability and sort of conservation that we've been talking about today. We have a question here which I believe is quite linked, and then we'll sort of the marine conservation organization Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, that is featured alongside you in Sea Shadows, became controversial due to their hands-on approach in intercepting vessels and sort of knocking against vessels. And I believe that the main guy is sort of couldn't leave the US for multiple years because they wanted to arrest him.
Paul Watson, yeah.
Yeah, Paul Watson, exactly. So what is your view on the method through which these associations must take conservation action, like more widely?
We are way more stealth. And that's why when you and that's also an issue, actually, by the way, from a fundraising point of view, because you watch Sea of Shadows, you remember Sea Shepherd, but you don't understand who we are, because when we are in a country, we cannot go around with a flag and with a logo. Of course, we have to remain as hidden as possible. Sea Shepherd, like other organizations, their core business is anti-poaching. So they're ground zero, and they try to keep the animals alive. Basically, they try to buy time. And if you remove nets, it's very important to remove nets, for example, like as they do. But don't forget that the same night they put back more nets in the sea. So it's a never-ending job. You do it because you have to do it, but you do not address the problem. You're not going to the core of the problem, because the real enablers and drivers are far, far away from the nets, even in another country. So I don't, I don't criticize the good work of other organizations. I'm just saying that if you want to solve problems, you need to be more strategic, more forward thinking, and go really try to ask yourself, okay, but who are the most important players of the supply chain? Who are the kingpins? Who is important to take out? Which are the right pressure points to apply pressure in order to disrupt the supply chain and really protect the animals or the wild spaces long term? So our approach is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, that's key, because especially in the sustainability world and sort of climate change fighting world, we have so many initiatives at every sort of level, and some of them sound great, but there's a lot of noise. I think a lot of things that don't actually make practice.
Lots of noise.
Yeah. So it's a
Lots
shame.
of noise, and if you allow me, lots of noise, and also, and don't get me wrong, also lots of emotions, and it's okay, because I also have emotions, and we are dealing with earth and living creatures, so of course you have emotions. But the whole environmental protection sector is still heavily emotionally driven, and it's not good, because when you just put your emotions, you just act out of emotions. When you need a lawyer, you need a good lawyer. You don't need an emotional lawyer. You don't need a lawyer that starts crying. Right? You need a good lawyer. When you need a surgeon, you need a very good surgeon. You not an emotional surgeon. So in the fight against environmental crime, and in general environmental protection, there are a lot of emotions, because guess what? Emotions are very useful for fundraising. You show an animal's dying, or to rescue this, rescue that, and immediately you have millions of dollars. Like us, you start talking about crime, supply chain, and I usually lose them halfway, because they don't get what I'm doing. So that's why you see emotions everywhere.
Yeah, I think it's also a problem, at least at the consumer level, the individual sort of non-technical Instagram world, where you're quite
exactly,
which is really sad. But anyway, okay, there are lots of more questions in the chat, but we'll be getting to them later, I promise.
Yeah.
Now, so if we're again thinking about fighting climate change in the wider sense, why is your work like especially crucial to this, and what drives you and keeps you going?
So first part of the question. So our mission is basically to protect wildlife, forests, and oceans from criminal organizations, and these include also illegal logging, so deforestation, and the trade of illegal timber. And deforestation is among the top causes for climate change. Okay, together with the burning of fossil fuels and livestock and so on. And guess what? According to various studies, illegal logging is the most profitable natural resource crime. They make a lot of money from deforestation. Institutes like, for example, the Global Financial Integrity estimated that between 60 and 90% of timber coming from South America or Southeast Asia is illegal. Imagine the amount of money that they are making over there. So, and is connected to money laundering, because deforestation and then cattle ranching is a great way to launder money coming from drugs and from other crimes. So no wonder that in many countries, those things are connected. In Brazil, deforestation and cattle ranching is responsible for 1/3 of case of slave and slave type labor. So there's a lot of bad thing around deforestation. And don't forget, and here I get a little bit, but don't forget that is also linked to beef. So you see deforestation, climate change, crime, beef, because the practical way to secure land holdings in many countries is to deforest for cattle pasture. So you want to hold the land for the future, you have to show that you are clearing the jungle because you want to put cattle for beef. And of course, criminal organizations then work with corrupt government officials to make it happen. So it's all connected, and that's why our work also has an impact on that.
Which is terrible, because then it's also connected to food waste, where 1/3 of the food we produce is waste. So it's just a whole...
All connected. And that's why I keep saying it's a complicated matter, and it's dangerous in general, to oversimplify something that is complex. When you oversimplify something that is complex, usually you get to the wrong conclusion, you use the wrong tools, you put the money in the wrong direction. So this is a complex matter, and so it requires time to understand it.
Yes, which I'm just looking in the chat. We have a comment about 60 to 90% of South American illegal timber is a great way to launder money from drugs, crimes. 1/3 of deforestation in Brazil is from cattle deforesting for cattle pastures, because Bolsonaro is corrupt. And then someone else also saying, and the EU is corrupt, agreeing the Mercosur beef deal with Brazil. So
yeah, it's a mess. I mean, yes. I mean, I don't want to enter politics, but of course, in Brazil, they have a president that definitely, clearly put business interest ahead of environmental protection, but also the protection of local communities. And when you have a president who does that, then of course it triggers, let's say, and it facilitates the work of organized crime. It's, of course, they feel safe.
Okay, so enough hearing from me. I really believe that your work needs to be seen and experienced. And yes, we've been talking about the dangers of emotion, but in this case,
yes, I prepare a few pictures and a few videos because it's I realize that it's very difficult to understand our job without seeing things, examples of what we do. So I put together this sort of slideshow to help you understand. It's a mix of pictures and videos, and it tells the story of basically of what we are doing. So intelligence, we do mostly intelligence gathering and analysis. So we have this is a picture of us in this patrolling in the Sea of Cortez. We were looking for the landing sites of the illegal fishing vessels, because they fish at sea, but then they go, of course, back to land. So we were looking for that. And we do, basically, we do 4 clusters of intelligence gathering. One is classic HUMINT and undercover operations. So we send in teams that pretend to be somebody else. It takes forever, but we get very close to the people. We even got invited to weddings and private events because we got really friendly with these people. And that's the key, to extract, of course, good intelligence. We do cyber intelligence. So our group of analysts, we have a group of young crime analysts led by an Italian girl. And they do a lot of work to putting together information coming from the field with information existing only on the net. We do geospatial intelligence, so we use different kind of softwares to put together data about different kind of crimes, so the convergence. And then, of course, there is a part of analysis, reporting, and dissemination, which is the sharing of this information with the law enforcement, but also with the public, because on our website you will find great public reports. I'm very proud of our public reports, are very complete. If you go to the next one, so it's an evidence-based work, as I said before. No rumors, none I hear that. No, every single word we write or we say is based on evidence and facts. So our teams are instructed to acquire all kind of possible information, names and photos and video and passports and geospatial data and documents, of course, bank accounts, also about legal, not only legal, because if you want to understand how a trafficker works, you have to have a good understanding also of his legal business, of everything else around him. And so this is all information that we collect. In this picture, you see a Jaguar trafficker in South America at the bottom. Then you see an ID, a Mexican ID. You see a very well-known rhino horn trafficker in Vietnam. And the last is a document from a Hong Kong custom after an ivory seizure. You can go to the next one. Okay, this is taken from the Ivory Game, and this is an example of some of the work we do in the field to recruit new sources. Okay, some of this work is done by our undercover investigators. Some other work is done by handlers, for example, former FBI and CIA, who have a great experience in managing sources and informants. And I also did a bit in some countries. Now my face is public, so I can do much less, as you can imagine. But back in the days, I was doing this, so going and recruiting people to get information. To the next one. This is again us in the Sea of Cortez. Next one. So we go around, we collect all kind of first-hand evidence. When we are at ground zero, like in this case, this was Gabon, so collecting information on illegal logging in Gabon. We are never really interested in the poaching, in the harvesting part, the ground zero. We're always interested in what happens next. Okay, but where is going this timber? Who is buying? Which truck they use? Which cargo they use? Which ship they use? Where is the end port of destination? So we are more interested in that part, in that kind of information. Next one. This is a video you should click play. Oh, an example of the kind of material that we get from our teams. This is a very well-known wildlife trafficker in Hong Kong. In this case, he's explaining to us about rhino horn trafficking. Basically, he told us that he can buy from us as much rhino horn that we can provide. And just to give you an example of these people have no problems in reselling whatever they buy, and they giving us the price and how it works. So this is how, but then you have to understand that from this kind of videos, after a mission, we get hundreds of hours of conversation recorded, sometimes in Chinese, Spanish, Vietnamese. So all this conversation has to be translated and transcribed. It's a long, long work. And then everything is sent to our crime analyst. You can go to the next one, maybe. Everything is sent to our crime analyst, so they can extract information from all these transcript. To give you an idea, for every 10, 12 days of work in the field by our undercover operatives, our crime analysts work at least 2-3 weeks just to digest the amount of information that is contained in these conversations. You can go to the next one. Yeah, this is the port of Hong Kong. You see the size of the problem here. Okay, and they usually, and it's not just Hong Kong, usually they check, inspect maybe 1-2% of all containers going in and out the country. So imagine it's either by chance or with intelligence. You will never get the right container if you don't have the right information. Next one. This is another video of this is one of the most important ivory trafficker, and this is was an incredible mission, and this was shot in Beijing, and after a lot of work, many months of meetings, finally this guy decided to take us to his warehouse, and over there is tons of ivory, and he explained us this come from Mombasa, this come from here. So this is an incredible opportunities for us to extract information. Next one. Okay, the video, yeah, you can play it a little bit if you want, but it's in the ivory game as well. But this is how the kind of stuff that we receive. Imagine sometimes it's frustrating because maybe the mic doesn't work, so we get the video, but we don't get the audio. Sometimes we get the audio, but we don't get the video. So sometimes it's messy. It's not an easy job. And that's why we always use 2, 3, 4, 5 devices at the same time as a backup in order to have at least the audio. You can go to the next one. This is again an example of collaboration, in this case in Bangkok. This is one of our local assets, and this is a seizure of a rhino horn coming from South Africa on their way to China, transiting through Bangkok airports. The Thai authorities are very good in profiling people now and getting them, and we help them. And this is what looks like. You know, they arrive in trolleys, and imagine one horn that you see there on the table. One horn is easily around $200,000 still raw, just one. So one horn, you almost buy an apartment. So look how much money is on the table. And this is before the horn is cut in pieces, is grinded and everything. So it's a lot of money. Next.
Sorry, I'm stuck.
This is another video of sometimes we intercept also live animals. If you click play, I think you see them moving. There is a illegal trade of baby orangutans from Borneo and Sumatra, so from Indonesia to Thailand, and then from Thailand they are sold to private people or zoos. They ended up in Dubai and in strange countries, and in this case we were fortunate enough to intercept the trader, so we knew they were coming. And those two little ones, they were found. They were transporting them in the back of a taxi with the traders to the buyers, and then the police stopped them. Next one. This is what crime analysis looks like. So hours and hours and hours of with our crime analysts to put together. It's like putting together the pieces of a puzzle, but without looking at the picture. Sometimes when you make a puzzle, when you do a puzzle, you have the picture on the box. So intelligence is like putting together a puzzle with no picture. So pieces by pieces, you understand what exactly do you have. Next one. This is just a few screenshots of geospatial intelligence. There's no time now to explain you what is geospatial intelligence is, but it's, as I said, we use different softwares to put together data coming from different sources in order to highlight where, for example, wildlife crime overlaps with drug trafficking or human smuggling or other crimes. And this is an example of the final product, one of the final products that we give to law enforcement. After 2 years, 3 years of working, we are able to reconstruct who are the most important players and how they are connected with each other. In this case, this is a criminal network, trafficking network of jaguar parts in Bolivia. So they are all people, most of them Asian, trafficking jaguars to be sold as tiger in Asia. It takes at least 1.5 years, 2 years of work to build this thing. But then, as you can imagine, when you share this with law enforcement, bam, you jumpstart their work of many, many months, because they can immediately start working on single individuals. And this is another example of how it can get very complicated. You know, this is a rhino horn trafficking. We started from one single person in Thailand and Vietnam at the top, and then looks what we get after many months of work. Different countries, different connections, different interests, companies involved, and so on. And this is an example of working with law enforcement agency. This is a Thai police going over some of the material that they get from us. Then, of course, at a certain moment, we are not police, so we have to step back, hand over everything, and they continue, of course, and we are not involved. We saw already. This is a very important wildlife trafficker in Vietnam. We met him many times, and this is an example when. Unfortunately, the Vietnamese government is protecting him. So we gave everyone a lot of information about him, but he's still doing what he's doing. This is the same, but with jaguar trafficking in Latin America. And I think we finished. And this is an example of the end of our work. Sometimes they get arrested. So this is a very important wildlife trafficker in Southeast Asia. Boon Chai Bak has been arrested a year and a half ago, 2 years ago in Thailand. And this is an example of the kind of people got arrested in Mexico. As you can see, are very dangerous people. As you can imagine from the picture, they don't do only wildlife trafficking; they do a lot of other stuff. And but we are very happy that they got fined. This is an old picture, but the same people. And this is the last slide. Alice first, before early mentioned that Interpol and they have the Wildlife Environmental Crime Division. Yes, and they also have wanted people. So this is an example of people wanted all over the world for environmental crimes, different kind of crimes. So it's a serious thing, and that require, of course, a very specific approach. And this is the last slide. I wanted to finish on a lighter tone, but not that light, because we are losing these creatures pieces by pieces every day. So that's the message.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We have 6 comments whilst we were sharing that, but before we address those, I want to ask you a really important question. It's clear, so from today, main point has been that you're doing a lot of COPA work behind the scenes, and we've discussed the sort of commerciality and you could call it superficiality of some of the work done in this field. How can we follow your projects, and how can we support you?
So yeah, as you say, we do a lot of things that the public will never see. And that's a problem, of course, because we are an NGO, we are a charity, so we need support from the people. And if the people cannot see what we do, it's difficult. But we do our best to share as much as we can with the public. And in fact, we have a unit, a group in our organization, just in charge of that, to share as much as we can. Sometimes we share stuff, but edited, redacted. And so apart from our public reports, we really believe in the power of documentaries and films. So we did the first with Netflix, The Ivory Game. We did the second one with Nat Geo, Sea of Shadows. They both executive produced by DiCaprio. I'm happy to tell you, and this is the first time I share this news because it happened last week. So we just closed an agreement with a very important film production company in the state, Cross Creek Picture, for the development and production of a third documentary series, this time entirely about us. So there will be time to explain exactly what we do. I hope we'll start production as soon as possible, early next year. We also planning to do a fiction. So to finally bring this topic to a broader audience. Documentary are great, but the audience sometimes is a bit narrow. So when we do fiction, you reach a lot of people. We, of course, we launched a graphic novels project to reach different people with graphic novels. We're very active on all social medias. And of course, we are a charity registered in the US. In the US, we don't get money from governments. We get money only from foundation and people. So that's a great way to help us. And also to retweet, repost, resend away what we post on our social media. That's a great help as well.
Wow, I'm overwhelmed by the amount of comments in the chat. Just reading them all. So someone asked a question that's very related. I think we've already sort of discussed it, but should we share about your work, or would this be counterproductive to what you do, and to what degree we can help? Can we help? But I think we've sort of established that
it's not counterproductive. When we are in a country, we are ghost. It's impossible to. No, nothing is impossible. It's very difficult to find us. So you don't hurt us. No.
Okay, perfect. That's really good to know and very important. Returning to the presentation that we saw, someone has asked, how long does it usually take before you deliver a map to local authorities? How do you keep doing what you do when, after connecting all the dots, the local authorities do nothing?
Yeah, good question. It depends. Usually we need at least 1 year to have a good understanding of the whole, the landscape and who does what. Also because whenever we can, and mostly it's about funding, we always try to approach the problem, the supply chain, with the top-down, bottom-up approach. So we send teams at the end of the supply chain, for example, in Hong Kong, and we send team at the beginning, and in theory, they should meet one day. So what they should understand who are the real enablers in the middle. So it takes a bit. So usually a year, but we always, more than once, we share like sort of intelligence brief on a fly. If we know that something important is happening, then we share immediately with the right people, and we take the risk. For example, in Thailand, that was the case. So after that, usually until now, we did a good work in establishing good relations with law enforcement. You have to understand that law enforcement receive from us ton of information, free of charge, no strings attached. They can also take the credit for whatever they do. So it's the perfect situation. It's a Christmas present for them. And so they're usually very receptive. They're usually very happy once they start working with us. They get a lot of information for free.
Actually, I'm just thinking, because last year I did a lot of work with MSF, Doctors Without Borders, and it actually reminds me quite a bit of what you do. But I'm really sorry we couldn't deal with all the questions in the chat, but I really encourage you to watch Shift Shadows, watch the Ivory Game, look at the website. I'm going to re-put the link in the chat for Earth League International. Follow them on Instagram, follow them on Facebook. I just followed them on Instagram. The page is really good. And I just want to ask you one last question, Andrea, before we have to go, which I'm really interested in personally. Are you optimistic for the future? And if you have an ideal world, or nearly an ideal world, do you think that there's any chance that we can get to there?
I'll be very honest with you. I'm honestly not very optimistic in my lifetime. Okay, because the level of destruction, the way we lay waste on Earth is incredible. But I truly hope that the next generation, and that includes also you, will learn how to deal with these problems in a different way. First of all, with more courage, and also with more collaboration. I see my work as a sort of I think it's called relay race. It's the sport that you have at the Olympics, when you run as fast as possible and then you give the baton to your team member, and then he goes and she goes. So I'm running as fast as I can, and one day I will give my baton to somebody else. But if we do nothing now, the next generation will find nothing. So in order to give them a chance to fight, we have to do as much as we can now, so they will find something alive to fight for. So I'm optimistic. I have to be optimistic. But in any case, I was born with this great passion. So I cannot not do what I do, regardless of the outcome. So that's who I am.
Lovely words to end on. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for everyone who came today. Just before we leave, I want to pass over to Agatha, which was one of the hosts from earlier today, because she has an announcement to make. But thank you again, Andrea, from the bottom of my heart.
My pleasure. Anytime.